I remember the sting of that night as if it happened only yesterday. I was 62 years old, a widow for 3 years, and I walked into Willow Creek Country Club, knowing I was already late to my daughter's wedding. My heels clicked against the polished marble as I tried to blend into the crowd. But I could feel eyes on me. People whispered, half smiles curling as if they knew something I didn't. I slipped toward the back of the reception hall, trying to catch my breath and gather myself. That's when I heard the clinking of a glass, the laughter quieting, and Kayla's voice rising above the crowd. My daughter, radiant in white, holding her champagne high. She thanked everyone for being there, for supporting her, for embracing this new chapter. And then came the line that cut me open. She said she was grateful to those who understood why some people hadn't come, that sometimes absence was the greatest gift. Her words felt like a knife wrapped in silk. I knew she was talking about me, even though I was standing right there. I had rushed to be on time, desperate not to miss her day. But in that moment, I realized she had already erased me from it. My heart sank. I stayed silent, holding myself steady, pretending I hadn't heard what I knew I had. Walking out of that hall felt like the longest walk of my life. The music picked up again. Laughter filled the room, and yet I felt completely invisible. I had given this girl life, held her hand when she scraped her knees, sat up with her during teenage heartbreaks. And now, she used her wedding toast to humiliate me. Driving home alone, the night pressing against the windshield. My mind wandered back to Richard. My husband had been gone 3 years, a sudden heart attack that left me not just grieving, but drowning in responsibilities. Kayla had stepped in at the time, offering to help me manage the finances. She said I wasn't in the right frame of mind, that grief-clouded judgment, that she would handle things until I found my footing again. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to think she was protecting me. But sitting there in my kitchen that night, her cruel words echoing in my head, I felt the first stirrings of doubt. On the counter, next to an unopened bottle of red wine, sat a silver-wrapped wedding gift I had never delivered. I tore it open with trembling hands, and inside, instead of ribbons and wrapping, were Richard's old files. For months, I had avoided them. It hurt too much to see his neat handwriting, his careful records. But that night, pain gave way to something sharper suspicion. I poured myself a glass of wine, spread the papers across the table, and started reading. At first, it was routine bills, statements, the ordinary flow of a life. And then my eyes caught on a clause buried inside a set of legal documents. It spoke of my mental decline, as if I had already been deemed incapable of managing my own affairs. My stomach tightened. I hadn't signed anything like that. That discovery stopped me cold. A wedding toast had cut me deep. But what I held in my hands threatened to change everything. My daughter's betrayal was no longer just emotional. It looked like the beginning of something much darker. And I knew, with a clarity that sobered me more than any drink could, that I had to find out the truth. The morning after the wedding, I sat at my kitchen table with Richard's papers spread in front of me. The legal documents still gnawed at me, especially the mention of my supposed mental decline. That phrase didn't just appear out of nowhere. I wanted to believe it was a mistake, maybe some boilerplate language, but the more I looked at the dates, the less sense it made. The documents were dated around the same time Richard had his last series of medical appointments. That was before he passed, and I remembered how sharp he still was, how clear our conversations had been. Something wasn't right. I picked up the phone and called Dr. Blake's office. He had been Richard's physician for over a decade, and I trusted him. When his nurse confirmed that there had never been a note of cognitive decline in Richard's file, my suspicions hardened. I knew then that this wasn't about clerical errors, it was about manipulation. Someone had written those clauses intentionally, and I had a good idea of who stood to gain. The thought made me sick, but I also knew I couldn't face this alone. That's when I reached out to Leo Santana, a private investigator I had heard about through a neighbor. He had a reputation for being thorough and discreet, especially with cases of elder fraud. When I explained what I had found, he listened patiently and told me to trust my instincts. He reminded me that families sometimes orchestrate these schemes slowly, weaving doubt about a parent's capacity until it seems believable to outsiders. His advice was simple but sharp: gather evidence and never let them see you panic. He even suggested I start recording my interactions with Kayla if I suspected she was trying to corner me. That advice came just in time. The very next day, Kayla called to invite me to lunch. She chose Maison Riverton, a polished little French bistro that prided itself on elegance. 1 o'clock sharp, she said, and I could almost hear the tension underneath her cheerful tone. I arrived with my phone carefully set to record, tucked in my handbag. From the moment I sat down, I felt the shift. Kayla's smile was wide, but her words carried a different weight. She spoke about how forgetful I seemed lately, about how much stress I must be under managing the house and bills. Then she moved the conversation toward assisted living facilities, even quoting the cost $4,000 a month as though she had already researched my supposed future. I sat there, nodding, letting her talk. But inside, I felt fury curling up my spine. She wasn't just concerned. She was laying the groundwork to strip away my independence, to make me look incapable. I heard Leo's words echoing in my head: don't fight, just record. So I kept my composure, even as every part of me wanted to push back. That night, back at home, I logged into my online accounts. Something Leo had said about tracing the money lingered with me. And there it was, strange digital records I couldn't explain. A hefty down payment had gone toward Evan's house, even though I hadn't given him a dime. Another line showed payments toward student loans in a stranger's name. And then I saw a transfer, large enough to make my hands tremble. To Willow Creek Country Club, the place where Kayla had just thrown her wedding, paid for with my money. The silver box had been sitting on my dresser for months, untouched, wrapped in paper I had carefully chosen for Kayla's wedding. I had meant for it to hold a gift, but instead it had become something of a reminder of Richard, of unfinished business, of things I didn't have the courage to face. That night, I finally peeled away the wrapping. My hands trembled as though I already knew what was inside would change everything. Beneath the paper lay a sturdy box, cool and heavy in my lap. I opened it slowly and found Richard's familiar handwriting on a sealed envelope, his private files stacked neatly beside it, and a small USB drive taped to the inside lid. My throat tightened. It felt like he was reaching out from beyond the grave, leaving me breadcrumbs because he had known I would need them. I started with the letter. Richard's words were steady, cautious, but I could read the worry between the lines. He wrote that he had grown suspicious of Kayla years before, that certain client funds never lined up, that disbursements were delayed without explanation. He had traced the discrepancies to her, but he hadn't confronted her directly. Instead, he had documented everything: nearly $300,000 in client money gone, hidden in accounts that didn't belong. And then came the sentence that made my blood run cold. He feared that if he wasn't around, I would become the next target. I set the letter down, my chest aching, then slid the USB into my laptop. The screen lit up with a recorded video, Richard's voice, his image grainy but unmistakable. He spoke directly to Evan, Kayla's brother, laying out dates, account numbers, and the patterns he had uncovered. He explained how she had delayed payments, forged minor authorizations, and concealed shortfalls until clients stopped asking questions. He urged Evan to protect me, to make sure I wasn't left vulnerable. When I scrolled through the documents, my heart nearly stopped. My own name appeared, attached to a power of attorney I had never signed. The signature was mine in appearance, but not in truth. My daughter had forged it. She had been planning for years to take everything I had. I sat in silence for a long time before I picked up the phone. The next day, Leo and I drove downtown to meet with Agent Naomi Brooks at the FBI field office. I handed over Richard's files, the letter, the USB, everything. Agent Brooks listened carefully, her expression sharpening as she flipped through the evidence. She didn't dismiss me. She didn't say I was imagining things. She said the words that made me both relieved and horrified. This was wire fraud, embezzlement, and elder abuse. The Bureau would take it from here. I should have felt safer walking out of that office. But instead, I felt exposed. Betrayal from family makes every lock seem useless. Every safe place feel breakable. And just when I thought I had seen the worst, Leo pulled me aside. His own digging had turned up more, at least $400,000 siphoned from my accounts, and another $3,000 stolen from clients Richard had once served. And he warned me it might only be the beginning. I thought I had already seen the worst of it, but Kayla proved me wrong. Once she realized I was questioning things, she struck back with a precision that chilled me. I woke up one morning to find my bank accounts frozen. My debit card was declined at the grocery store, and when I called the bank, they explained that legal documents had been submitted questioning my competency. The same daughter I had trusted was claiming I was no longer capable of handling my own affairs. It didn't stop there. Adult Protective Services called, telling me they had received reports that I was confused, neglecting bills, possibly vulnerable to exploitation. I almost laughed at the irony. I was the one being exploited. Yet she was painting me as the danger to myself. It's one thing to have money stolen from you. It's another to have your dignity stripped away by someone who knows exactly how to twist the system. I agreed to the competency evaluation, though part of me resented the humiliation of it. Sitting in that sterile office, answering questions that felt like an insult to everything I had managed on my own since Richard's passing. I held myself steady. I knew I had to prove beyond a shadow of doubt that my mind was clear. When the results came back, the examiner noted I was perfectly capable, sharp, organized, and coherent. That report became my shield. One Kayla couldn't bend into her narrative. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of power return to me. Meanwhile, Leo stayed in close contact with Agent Brooks at the FBI. The Bureau was digging deeper into Richard's files and the trail Kayla had left behind. Every day seemed to reveal another layer. It turned out my money was only a fraction of the damage. Over 4 years, Kayla had siphoned funds from at least 12 clients, mostly older couples and widows. The total climbed toward $8,000 with forged signatures, falsified ledgers, and shell accounts carefully crafted to hide the theft. I remember sitting at my kitchen table, staring at the numbers Leo placed in front of me. It wasn't just about me anymore. Kayla had built an entire life, an entire image of success, on money stolen from people who trusted her. People like Richard's oldest clients, people who had called her the smart one, who believed she was looking out for them. What broke me wasn't only the scale of her theft, but the realization that she wasn't done. This wasn't desperation. This was a system she had built, a framework of power she was trying to cement through the courts, through lies about my health, through every lever she could pull. Betrayal is one thing. Betrayal that weaponizes the law, that tries to make you disappear behind a curtain of incompetence, that's another kind of cruelty altogether. And as the FBI widened their net, one truth became painfully clear. My daughter's schemes weren't just personal anymore. They were criminal on a scale that reached far beyond my kitchen table. And I had the sinking feeling the worst of it had yet to surface. It was a gray morning when the black SUVs rolled down my street. From my window, I saw the agents step out in their dark jackets, the letters FBI bold against the drizzle. My heart pounded even though I knew this moment was coming. And then, there she was, my daughter, Kayla, walking down the front steps of her own home in handcuffs. She didn't fight, didn't cry. Her chin was high, her eyes defiant, as if she still believed she could talk her way out of this. For a moment, I didn't see the woman who had betrayed me. I saw the little girl I had once held at the edge of a swimming pool, telling her it was safe to jump. Now she was being led into a government car, her wrists bound, her choices finally catching up to her. The neighborhood watched from behind curtains and driveways. To them, it was a scandal, gossip to pass around at the next barbecue. To me, it was private grief laid bare in public. I wanted to collapse under the weight of it, yet at the same time, I felt a bitter relief. At least, I told myself, the bleeding had stopped. But the bleeding hadn't stopped. Later that week, Tyler showed up at my door. He looked pale, his hands shaking as he carried a stack of documents and a small black notebook. He said he had gone through the safe Kayla kept hidden in their house. Inside, he found insurance policies, one in his name, one in mine, both valued at $5,000, both with signatures that weren't ours. My knees nearly gave out as I scanned the papers. She hadn't just stolen from me, she had been planning for our deaths. The notebooks were worse. Columns of numbers, calculations, and chillingly specific notes about accidents, a fall down the stairs, a car brake line, even an entry about medication mix-ups. Each one was a scenario she had weighed like business strategies. I pressed my hand against my chest, struggling to breathe. All this time, I thought I was fighting to protect my savings, my independence, my dignity. But the truth was far darker. My own daughter had looked at me not as a mother, not as a person she loved, but as a payout waiting to be collected. The arrest was not the end. It was only the beginning of a deeper nightmare. The question that haunted me that night was simple and unbearable. Had she already decided we were worth more to her dead than alive? The trial was held in a courthouse that smelled faintly of polished wood and old paper, the kind of place where truth feels heavy in the air. I sat quietly on the wooden bench, hands folded, listening as the prosecution laid out everything they had uncovered. Spreadsheets projected on a screen showed the missing money. Forensic analysts explained the forged power of attorney. The forged insurance policies were displayed. My name and Tyler's signatures twisted into something unrecognizable. And then came the notebook's pages where Kayla had written out scenarios of how our lives might end, as if we were nothing more than entries on a ledger. The room was silent except for the steady voice of the prosecutor. I stole glances at Kayla. She sat at the defense table, no longer radiant, no longer the daughter I had once believed in. There was a distance in her eyes, as though she had already detached herself from the reality unfolding around her. When the jury returned, the foreman spoke the words I both dreaded and longed to hear: guilty on all counts: wire fraud, forgery, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, even consideration of attempted murder. The judge sentenced her to 28 years in federal prison. 28 years. I should have felt triumph, but what I felt was something far more complicated: relief and devastation braided together in a way that left me trembling. Walking out of that courthouse, I knew I hadn't just lost money. I had lost my daughter. Grief doesn't always come with a funeral. Sometimes it comes in the form of handcuffs and verdicts. In the months that followed, I began the slow work of rebuilding. Evan checked in often, helping me untangle finances and reminding me that family doesn't end with betrayal. Tyler, broken but resilient, brought over groceries and fixed the things Richard used to handle. Together, the three of us started piecing together a new kind of family, smaller, but grounded in honesty. I learned how to breathe again without suspicion. I planted flowers in my garden, reopened old photo albums, and even allowed myself to laugh at dinners where the weight of the past didn't press down so hard. Recovery wasn't sudden. It came in quiet moments when I realized I was no longer living in fear of my own child. Looking back, betrayal nearly destroyed me. It hollowed out the trust I thought was unshakable. But truth, as painful as it was, gave me something betrayal never could: clarity. Justice gave me room to reclaim my dignity, my independence, my life. And so I share my story not just as a wound, but as a warning and a reminder. Trust is sacred, but resilience is stronger. If you've ever faced betrayal in your own family, know that survival is possible, even when love has been twisted into something unrecognizable. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please like, share, and leave a comment. I believe that the more we speak about these hidden struggles, the less alone we all feel.